Meeting for October 21st, 2025 is called to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bristow?
Here.
Councilmember Ennie?
Here.
Councilmember Badami?
Here.
Vice Mayor Moore?
Here.
Mayor Huddis?
Here. So I'd like to invite Isabella Burlinson up to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Isabella is a very engaged young woman who does a lot of activities in the community. So some of her favorite activities are to dance and sing with her best friends, aka the Golden Girls. Another activity is doing community service in the Bay Area, and specifically volunteering with the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, and a lot of activities with that. She's also volunteered at Walden West and has been a counselor with their program and volunteers at the Happy Hollow Park and Zoo. She also founded a club at the high school called Animal Lovers Club. So thank you for agreeing to do our Pledge of Allegiance, and go ahead. So please stand.
Please stand, rise, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. A round of applause for Isabella, and you can say thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll get started, and I apologize to the public for starting this meeting late. We had a very interesting and informative session on California environmental law that will apply to many of the projects that we have in front of us, and kindly delivered to us by principals of the David J. Powers and Associates firm. And we're very grateful for their time, but we had many questions and went over. So with that, we will go to consent items, and we'll take comment on the consent items first, and then I have one announcement about one of the items. So Captain Seuss, that's the only card that I have for consent.
I'd like to start off with always with a little sense of humor. A letter just came from the big man in red. He sent it to me. Oh, the things that he said.
So if I could ask you, does this apply to the consent items?
Yes, this is
or
one,
is this,
one through 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have for minutes. These are all about minutes, and I am kind of complaining. I'm not trying to be specific, but like I went to minutes on a bunch of like art and culture on 1015. I was only given 2 minutes to speak. The public was given 2 minutes to speak. It's a minor thing, but it is a major thing because you're supposed to speak on it. On October 8th in planning, they changed it because I'm having problems with, you guys are saying public, members of the public, when like Charlie last week spoke and addressed, and I'm a member of the public, instead of putting, whoever we come as, because we have different opinions. But Planning Commission actually did change their minutes to reflect most of them, and only Rob Stump abstained from the vote, but they did change it, which I appreciated. But what the problem with that is, when I looked at the tape of that, like my minutes, all of it was cut out. The voice, I'm speaking in the voice, and it was cut out. So there's major problems of censorship that I'm saying on all these minutes. So I'm talking about all the four, like even the special counsel. I spoke about some of the minutes and stuff like that and what's going on, and you're just okay. It's just voiced of concern, but I'm saying major concern on like safety issues, because what was cut out was the safety across the street. About the high school in 151. You can't hear any of that. East Main Street, and I was saying Yellow Brick Road, and I came in as a Munchkin. And none of that. I mean, on Planning Commission, they fixed that, but you guys, I'm just complaining in general. I don't want to, but I just want to bring it out to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on our consent items? So before we have a motion, I wanted to offer a correction to item 3 in the minutes. Which is the minutes, and that relates to the item that we discussed, item 12 on October 7th, which was to consider revisions to the enabling resolutions, to have 7 adults on the commissions and 9 adults on the DEI commission. The motion did not pass unanimously as indicated, but passed by a vote of 3-2, with Vice Mayor Moore, Councilmember Rennie, and Councilmember Risto voting in favor, and Councilmember Badami and Mayor Hudes opposed. So with that correction, are there any other comments on the minutes or on the full consent items? Okay, would anyone like to offer a motion on the consent items? Vice Mayor?
I'll move approval of consent with the correction that you stated.
Councilmember Risto?
Second.
Okay, we can just voice vote on this. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so now we can go to verbal communications. And I have 2 cards here on verbal. So Karen Yamamoto and then Captain Seuss.
Hi again. I'm not sure if I can ask this, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Is there going to be another meeting on this to finish it? That's what I would like. I would like to see this, the people come back and finish the presentation of earlier. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Captain Seuss.
I did have flowers up here that I bring, and you guys take them off, and I don't appreciate that because it's part of my thing, and it's just rude. I think that when I leave flower and bring flowers or some treats that you don't even have them up here now. Now I sent you in a couple pictures. This is a follow-up. The first picture of appointed, that's to what I mentioned earlier. There's no, I don't know how CNN got into there because it was all roped off, and it just doesn't make any sense that the map of radioactive, I think that's really important. The third picture, I upped my ante for $300,000 for the identification of a second shooter and picture. Also wanted my usual stuff, safety concerns, what I just brought up about the parking, and I sent in a video, 340 thing of Pinehurst and Lynn that got me started in all this. The measure A, I want to bring up 95% of the people that get hurt, have to be transported out, have to go to the county instead of the local things, which is, I think, to be a liability issue on the town when one person gets hurt or one person gets killed, because I think it's your responsibility to make sure that you go to the closest hospital. Because I know people, I know somebody that didn't get time for a stroke, and it's 1 hour to take a shot. The Civil War that I'm saying, that's basically, I believe it's already here. There's too many people getting killed and stuff like that. That's all part of Project 2025. My Project 2026, World Cups, Super Bowl, March Madness, and Escobar. I only have a couple of minutes left. I do think that the naked bike people from Portland might be a big thing if all this comes in. And I just want to, protest with the song. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would just remind the audience that we need to stick to the subject matter jurisdiction of the town. And so I just remind people when they're speaking about that. Joe Enns?
Thank you. I'm a community organizer. I always say this, I get up here. Community organizer for Friends of Lost Gatos Creek. It's something we really need to protect. That's the main thing I do. And I guess you could call me liaison to the homeless. We lost 2 homeless people. I didn't bring it up last time. They're in an at-risk group. I counsel them. I learn from them too on how to socialize. I love them all. And they're going to be something that's going to be very helpful at some point here in the future to the town. If, I don't want to say all hell breaks loose, but given the condition of what's going on politically and everything, it's uncertain times, I think, for us. And but we've got a good town here. We've got a lot of money saved up for disaster awareness, and I feel real positive about it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online who'd like to speak on verbal?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, so with that, we'll close verbal communications and move on to the items that we have on the agenda. And so I believe the next one is item 7. Is that correct? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, honorable council members. This evening, we are considering approval of an agreement with NHA Advisors to conduct a series of studies that will strengthen the town's financial planning and long-term sustainability. These studies include a fiscal condition analysis, a fiscal impact analysis, and an asset liability management study. 3 key components that were specifically requested in the town's request for proposal and identified as priorities for improving our financial forecasting, liability management, and understanding of the fiscal impacts of future development. As background, the town issued a request for proposal on August 20th, 2025, and received 5 proposals. 3 staff members independently evaluated and ranked them based on qualifications, methodology, experience, and cost. The rankings were consistent across all reviewers, and the NHA Advisors were identified as the top-ranked firm. NHA will lead a highly experienced team, which includes Raftelis, who will conduct the fiscal condition analysis and develop a long-term forecasting model, Wildan, who will perform the fiscal impact analysis, and NHA Advisors, who will oversee overall project coordination and lead the asset liability management study. To clarify from the desk item provided earlier today, the original staff recommendation already included all 3 core studies and related optional elements within their scopes, such as scenario modeling and council decision support components, which were 2 optional elements of the first study. The only item not included in the original recommendation was the optional wildfire risk mitigation study, which was not part of our original RFP, but was offered by NHA as an additional service. The staff report erroneously included the option of the wildfire risk mitigation study to the original not to exceed amount recommendation, which is not the case. Staff also presented a lower cost alternative option as a desk item that limits the scope of the base elements of the 3 core studies. However, this option can be expanded later to include additional components as the work progresses, ensuring flexibility while maintaining fiscal prudence. The total project timeline is approximately 6 months, but the consultant team anticipates delivering preliminary results earlier with the ability to accelerate certain components, such as the fiscal impact analysis. Staff will work closely with NHA to provide data and coordination so that the results can directly inform the fiscal year 2026-27 budget process and beyond. This project will also deliver a 10-year forecasting model, replacing our current 5-year projection tool and providing the town with a more dynamic and forward-looking fiscal planning resource. These studies align with the Council's strategic priority of fiscal stability and transparency, ensuring our long-term forecasts, capital planning, and liability management are based on clear, data-driven analysis. Being cost-conscious, staff recommends the alternative recommendation from what is in the staff report. Staff recommends authorizing the town manager to negotiate and execute an agreement with NHA advisors for the full suite of core RFP services, excluding the optional wildfire study and excluding the 2 optional services in the first study, in an amount not to exceed $191,000, with flexibility to come back to council to expand that scope at a future time should it be necessary, and to approve the corresponding $191,000 budget adjustment from the unassigned fund balance. We're also pleased to note that Mark Northcross, principal of NHA Advisors, is with us tonight via Zoom. I haven't been able to get a hold of him, but he's supposed to be on Zoom, and is available to answer questions from the council. Gita Ungadi, our finance director, and I are here also to answer any questions you may have. With that, I'll return it to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I think there are probably going to be a lot of questions from the council, but I thought maybe we'd just check and see whether there's any public comment. I don't have any cards on this. Is there anyone online who'd like to ask questions about this?
We just have, it looks like the consultant raising his hand. So I'll make him a panelist.
Okay, great. So thank you for the concise report. It's over 392 pages of proposal here. I hope that the final report from the consultants will be more brief than that. So I just wanted to start with any questions from the council. Councilmember Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to be clear on what you're recommending for what staff's recommending. You said not the 2 optional studies that go with study track 1, but it would include, and not include the wildfire study, but it would include the core studies of 1, 2, and 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the 10-year forecasting model you mentioned you were going to develop, that's part of study 2, correct?
It's part of study 1, but all 3 analyses come together to inform that study.
So you really need to do all 3 to get the best forecasting model?
There is a component of the ALM study, the pension analysis, which would be integrated into the first one. So the ideal would be to do the 3.
Okay, because maybe I'm not completely digesting that. I was, again, the dollar amount is a lot, so I'm a little worried to do studies, and I want to make sure that we make the best use of the studies. And I'm wondering if we create a 10-year forecasting model and we see forecasts, that might help us decide whether we really need to do study 3 or not. But you're telling me we kind of need to do study 3 in order to get the 10-year forecasting model.
So pension costs over the course of the 10 years, they will be handled in the first two studies. However, considerations about transferring the pension funds to CalPERS and scenarios related to around that will be better informed if you do the third study.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I think a little bit of the background comes from the Finance Commission meetings where we have, I think, one commissioner in particular, but I think the commission more generally really interested in the asset liability management survey. So I think that's an important piece of context. So I was going to ask if there's any real downside to going with the $191,000 sort of core study. It sounds like probably no. It's just that you might, if we want to do any of these other pieces, you'll have to come back to council for approval.
Yeah, the component that we're removing is when you look at study one, there's a base cost and a cost with options. The two elements that are part of the options directly relate to the process of identifying impacts to specific departments and creating decision packages of what to do when you're making decisions. I think last year we were quite effective going through the process to reduce the budget. This week, the senior staff will be meeting to talk about options of our 2026-27 budget process. They're the ones that will be impacted trying to execute the council's direction and policy when it comes to any reductions or changes within their operations. So I first think it may make sense to have them have a chance to decide kind of the approach we take, and if we feel we can enhance our response to the council by integrating these options, then we later can come to the council.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And then a second question is, I think like Councilmember Rennie, this is, no matter how you cut it, $200,000 is a lot of money, especially when sort of where we're coming from is trying to create more financial health for the town, though I fully understand the idea here is that we will spend some money up front to save money over the long term. I guess my question is, do we foresee any other, sort of short-term upcoming unbudgeted costs that would need to come out of the unassigned fund balance?
Most likely, yes, but I can't answer exactly. There's things such as the attorney's costs, depending on what level of activity is there. Depending on the options that come out, if we want to consider the potential for revenue measures, we may need to incur consulting costs related to that. Other unanticipated expenses could come up that we just can't predict at this point. So I can't just definitively say, no, there won't, or if yes, what that dollar amount may be.
Okay, and then last question on that. Is this our first time touching the unassigned fund balance this fiscal year?
No, it's not.
When else did we pull from it?
The largest increase we incurred were associated with attorneys' contracts that were increased, and Geeta can speak to other elements.
Yeah, so technically the fiscal year 2025-26 proposed budget was balanced with $0.9 million from the unassigned fund balance. Then we needed additional legal expenses, which was $200,000. And with this one, our unassigned fund balance decreased to $2.7 million. So we would still have sufficient amount in the future if we use the unassigned fund balance.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council members? I had a couple of questions. So in thinking about these studies, I try to boil it down to a simple question that they're going to answer, each of those. And so for me, study one, and this gets to the sequencing of the work, because it's in the proposal, it's spread out over 6 months. And so I'm hoping that we can get some of these questions answered, a little more quickly than 6 months. For me, the study one is answering the question, will the town have the financial resources to support the requirements of our residents over the next 5 years? Study two answers the question, what will the financial effect of growth be over the next longer period of time, maybe 8 to 10 years or even longer? And then study 3, the ALM, I think answers the question, what funds or assets should the town maintain in order to cover the liabilities that we have? That's for pensions, roads, et cetera, that are generated over the next 10 years, taking into account different scenarios and risk levels. Actually, scenarios are part of all 3 of those questions, I think. Is that fundamentally correct?
It is, but with the one nuance I would say to study 1, the analysis will identify the fiscal constraints from a perspective of revenue and expenses and all the implications of liabilities and capital. It will not necessarily make the decisions for the council in terms of what services, if you define them as services that should continue, are sustainable. That's something that will be a policy discussion that the council will have to have. Right.
Okay. So with that, in looking at study 2, that is, I think, only $18,000 out of this. And it seems to me that that could be done quickly, maybe as it was modeled on the BAE study, and I appreciate you're including that as an example in the RFP, and hopefully we'll get something similar to that. That could be concluded, in maybe 6 weeks, and that could then be an input to study 1. Is that possible?
I had a discussion with the consultant with regards to the studies. The 2 providers that are there have an extensive level of experience in California in terms of doing these analysis for other cities. And in regards to the fiscal impact analysis, Wildan has a lot of experience with cities that are facing some of the same issues we are with building and development and its impact in future years for those towns. So as part of that, the consultants were astutely aware of the significant level of public involvement and engagement and discussion along the way these analyses were to be performed. And so they built all that in their timeline of 6 months. It wasn't contemplated that a final report and the first time the council and finance commission would see data was going to be 6 months from now. It would be all along the way. And so for the second study, they will be able to accelerate that study and decouple it a little bit from fiscal condition analysis number 1, and then integrate the pieces that make sense. So if the desire is to get a quicker result on the long-term 2040, it will take the data that we provide them with regards to the future development for them to do that analysis, and they should be able to accelerate.
Okay, that makes sense. And so it isn't just the time that it takes, but also it seems to me the answer to the question about growth and the financial effect of growth is really an input to the town's 5-year forecast, although probably a lot of that falls outside the 5-year time frame.
It would be, given that the developments, the first one that is proceeding, which would be the lodge, will be a several-year project. So I anticipate some impact happening towards the end of the 5 years. And in regards to the 10-year forecast they would have, we would see potentially a higher pronounced impact on years 6 through 10.
Okay, great. And so that, to me, that study is very important. It really, what it does is it says the impact of growth equals the revenue generated from the growth minus the costs, the operational costs and the capital costs that are needed. And some of those costs might be covered well by the entitlements and the applications, but there may be some infrastructure costs that are not covered. And so getting our arms around that, I think, is very important. So I think that's a really key part of these 3 studies. And I'd encourage us to try to do that as early as possible in the process. Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, actually, sort of continuing on your line of questioning about the timeline, our manager just mentioned the potential of exploring a revenue measure at some point in the future. And this is our first time talking about this fiscal year, I think. But if we were to do that, that would have to be before the end of the year. I think we'd have to have the first conversation about that before the end of the year. And so I'm wondering if any of this information would be available for a, early to mid-December sort of preliminary discussion about the merits of a revenue measure.
When I brought up the concept of a revenue measure, again, it is not informed with an analysis that they were contemplated to perform. We will have a draft 5-year forecast that we will be using for internal purposes in terms of planning the next fiscal year, which can provide some insight in terms of what our situation is. But I think what's more important right now is to set the stage of how we make a decision going forward. I'm not in a position to recommend right now engaging in a revenue measure. However, if we find out that we need to do that and it's May or June, we're then very hard pressed if the timeline is within 2026 to be able to do something about that. So I think what I want to balance in the conversation would be if we receive data that would tend to indicate that might be a conversation the council needs to have, accelerating that data, even if it's preliminary from the consultants, is valuable to the council to have that conversation. So that's one, we can do that. And then two, a direction I was contemplating under my authority in the town code to establish an ad hoc committee would be to establish an ad hoc committee to participate in the evaluation and discussion over our future budget considerations, to see if there's other input that we should be considering in formulating the direction we proceed going forward. And that's something we can do a lot sooner, potentially even as early as next month.
Okay, no, that sounds good and that's helpful. Yeah, I agree with what you just shared. I think all of this will be super informative if the council does collectively decide that that's a direction we'd like to go in. So I think that's all important, that it'll, a lot of this will come, sort of early, or at least I think sounds like first quarter of next year. But I would just say, I think as we're thinking about these timelines, not waiting to get all of this data before we start having those conversations about revenue, because we would be too late. And agreed that I would never want to jump to a conclusion about whether we should or shouldn't proceed. But I think if it's on the table at all, we have to start having the conversation.
I think I can say safely, without conducting a study, that if you added on all the life cycle assets and which are HVACs and things that need to be done from facilities, soccer fields and whatnot, or perpetual assets, roads, trees, and sidewalks, that the annual contribution to that would far exceed the available revenue with the operations to support. And so from that perspective, if the policy was cover everything appropriately in that manner, considering all those liabilities, we already have an answer. I can tell you right now, yes, we need more revenue. We can't support that, or debt financing. In terms of the policy discussion the council would need to have to decide how much, how, and what form, that's something that would be informed on some of this data, and we would ask the consultant to accelerate where they can preliminary data, which they were going to do, and engage finance and town administration, and what does it mean, how should we respond to that, what adjustments need to be made for a final report, and then when do we come to council to talk about it.
Great. Okay, that's helpful. And the last thing I'll just say on that is that I know our consultant is listening, so the fact that this is on our minds, I think, will be helpful in terms of teeing things up in the right order. So thank you.
Councilmember Rennie.
So I want to go back to the impact analysis a little bit. We talked about this a couple years ago, maybe it was 3 years ago, I can't remember anymore, and we didn't go forward with it. And in my mind, I wasn't very supportive because I think the cost was more than 18 at the time. But my concern is there's many different scenarios, different assumptions that could occur, and I wondering if maybe we have a mid-development check-in on the assumptions that are planned versus getting a fully baked solution where I go, well, I don't believe this because I think this particular assumption is way off, for example. So it might be worth having a discussion about the planned assumptions before we get a fully baked project.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, these models are only as good as the assumptions, and it's all in the assumptions. So I think it'd be valuable if town manager be willing to come back at some point during the project and review what some of the assumptions are.
Can I get some guidance in terms of the role of the Finance Commission in that back and forth?
Well, I think there's a lot of value in the Finance Commission having a look at these as well. We have a lot of moving parts now. We have the council, we have the Finance Commission, and then potentially an advisory committee as well. So I don't want to sit here and say what order or sequence things should be done in, but it does seem like the council at some point having a look at the assumptions would be valuable.
So I just wanted to confirm, in fact, as we proceed with bringing interim information forward, whether it's the assumptions or some basic data, that we should be engaging both the Finance Commission and the council.
At least from my opinion, yeah,
Okay.
Definitely. And I actually had a question related to that. So the ALM study is probably the one that I'm least comfortable and familiar with. And so I'm wondering, has the proposal for the ALM study been provided to the Finance Commission, and whether there's any feedback, particularly with a commissioner who's very engaged in that, about whether this might meet what they're talking about?
The RFP scopes were discussed with the commission and input taken for all three studies. I did not bring the Finance Commission into the decision-making process of evaluating the 5 RFPs to determine which one should be selected. However, we did take the extra step, which was not a required step in the procurement, of after making a recommended selection, the one before you, we provided that RFP, the RFP and that submission to the chair of the Finance Commission and asked for just a due diligence review to see, was there something about these that you would be concerned about in the case that we may have missed something that the perspective of the Finance Commission we didn't undertake. And the comments back from the chair were positive and appreciative of the fact that they were one of the only providers that had all 3 studies that they proposed to do, and that there would be value in doing all 3.
Okay, I'm sure the Finance Commission can access our staff reports, but I think it may have been mentioned at the last Finance Commission meeting that it might be valuable not to put them in a decision-making process, but at least to inform them of the what we're about to vote on.
We did provide them links to the items that are on the staff report. The only item that they may have not received is the desk item that came out this afternoon, which had a reduced scope and a reduced dollar amount.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. So I did not see that desk item, so it's not clear to me what you're now recommending. I understand that study number 4 is off the table. So staff's recommendation is study 1.
If you look at it's page 4 of the staff report. You'll have study 1 that shows a $105,500 base and a $165,000 number with options.
Yes.
What we're proposing is to do the $105,000, and what's being eliminated is the decision-making piece on the back end that staff will take on initially, and we won't propose it unless we see the return on the investment to go through a consultant to do that work. Study 2 would be the $18,000 that's currently listed there.
Okay.
Study 3 would be the full not to exceed amount of $50,000. The optional study for wildfire risk mitigation was not in the RFP, although was provided in the proposal. That is not included. And then the team management studies for 1 and 2 from NHA of $17,500 would be necessary for studies 1 and 2, and whether or not we do study 3, that component would still be there, so there won't be additional cost if we take on study 3.
Okay, thank you.
So just to so it was 105 and 18 and 50?
And 17.5.
And 17.5. Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
One other quick question about that and a piece of feedback. So the 17.5 is our teams, the Town of Los Gatos staffs. No.
So NHA advisors made the proposal to the town, and they leveraged two consultants that are experts in those respective fields. So they're doing the coordination across the two teams and doing work on the ALM study.
Their team management. Okay, got
Correct.
it. Okay, got it. And then the piece of feedback I would provide is on your question about the role of the Finance Commission. I think it makes a lot of sense to have the Finance Commission be involved in this process, but and just to be clear, that they would not be making direct adjustments to anything that the consultant is working on, but rather providing input to the town council for the town council to make decisions about any adjustments that need to be made.
Absolutely, their role is advisory, but given the significance of these reports, I just wanted to make clear that it wasn't that come directly to the council, because I know the Finance Commission is very intimately desiring to be a part of and understanding what will be central to this decision making going forward. In the end, the recommendation on those assumptions would be the consultants in consultation with staff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Risto?
Thank you. I appreciate the report and the layout of all of this. I agree, obviously, that having a firm that can oversee all three aspects of this study is really important, so that all the parts go together and we have a better understanding. I think we all understand that we have a structural budget deficit, but going into what our asset liability issues are and our fiscal condition, I think we need a deeper dive into that. And I know that in the past there was a request for fiscal impact analysis. I didn't support it early on because I thought we didn't have a choice. We have to plan for housing. So it wasn't like a decision of should we do housing or should we do more commercial or something. We had to plan for the housing. But now that we have got this housing plan and we've got other projects coming on that we hadn't planned, I think it is going to be really critical understanding what our future might look like. And I do, when I think about the projects that are before us, anything that's been approved probably won't be built for at least 3 or 4 years. So the impact in 5 years is going to be pretty minimal, but going out 10 years is going to be absolutely important to us so we understand what we're looking at and what benefits or deficits we're facing. At one of the Finance Commission meetings, I think Chair Reimers made the comment, don't be afraid when you see the number, it's going to be big. The number was bigger than I feared, but I do think that we can't skimp on understanding what our financial condition is and what steps we're going to have to take. I think the wildfire risk is important, but I guess because I glanced at the desk item, I'm okay with dropping it. I would just like to hear, I know it's $45,000, if you could expand on the justification for why we considered it and why we're considering dropping it, and would we do something in place, or do we have another way to understand our issues, or would this be more financial and we're going to not embrace that right now?
So the staff report erroneously indicated that we had included it in the not to exceed amount. That wasn't the case. And so we were never including it from the get-go, partly because it wasn't a component of the request for proposal for all the providers to be able to quote or push that forward. One of the unique activities that this firm has done is they were selected by the town of Paradise to do this analysis there after the campfire. And so they've been very intimately involved in the areas that we are concerned about, with a community, with a large percentage of our community being in a high, very high or moderate risk level. So to understand in a draconian event here, what does that mean from a property tax, sales tax, economic capacity perspective for us to provide service, that dollar amount? What does it mean for us to protect against that, and how do you finance that over a long period of time, such as wildfire mitigation and things of that nature? So there is a very high value to that. The way I looked at this was, it doesn't preclude us from expanding the scope later. And I want to wait until our emergency manager is able to see if we're successful in the RFPs that we've allocated about $800,000 worth of the $1 million you allocated earlier this year. And if we are not successful in a number of RFPs, then we can make the decision, do we reallocate some of that money to do this study to help inform how do we pay for the multi-million-dollar expenditures over the course of 20 years that we need to do to reduce the risk and hazard in our community of wildfire.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with that. I think that it would make more sense to take a look at that a little bit later. But from the work that the Wildfire Advisory Group, the Citizens Group, did, they identified about $45 million worth of work that would need to be done on town property only over the next 20 years, much of that front-loaded. So we know that number is probably very large, and so I would suggest that if we do come back to that, that we use some of that work as a starting point for the consultant and to hone in on those aspects that are absolutely town property, town responsibility. It wasn't entirely clear. So we can come back to that one later, in my opinion, as well.
I know the consultant is listening, and it would be beneficial for them to consider that type of information and see, could you also integrate some of that into the other studies?
Great. One other question, and that's about process. So has there been feedback from the department heads, particularly focused on police department, since they're a very large part of the budget? And if there have the Meliora report findings and recommendations that have some dollars attached to them, has that been provided to the consultants, and or will it be provided during the process?
They will make the request of us, the data they're looking for. I expect them, and they have a listing of those documents in the response. It doesn't include the Meliora report, but it also doesn't include our 2022 assessment of infrastructure, liabilities, ADA upgrades, and things of that nature. So we will provide them whatever reports that we see have a beneficial insight into the work they're trying to perform. So Meliora would be part of that. The infrastructure report would be part of that. If the ad hoc group is not an approved group of the council, but it's still good work that you can look to, and so we'll provide that to them. And then they can ask us what additional information they would need.
Okay, thank you. And this one just occurred to me, so I apologize for it maybe being a little bit of a surprise question, but to put the cost of this $191,000 in perspective, do we know what the cost of the Meliora report was?
Approximately $80,000.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. Other questions? Councilmember Badami, it looks like you're ready to say something.
No, but I can try a motion unless somebody has comments. Okay. So I move to authorize the town manager to enter an agreement with NHA Advisors, LLC, to deliver staff's alternative recommendation in delivering and executing base costs of Study 1, Study 2, along with team management for both studies, and Study 3 for a total not to exceed $191,000.
Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I'll second the motion.
And if I may, with an amendment to authorize the town manager to execute said agreements and to appropriate from the unassigned fund balance $191,000.
I accept that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, further discussion?
Public comment.
I thought I took public comment. We didn't have any. So, okay. So with that, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you for initiating this. I think it's going to be very helpful for the town. So we're on item 8, and Ms. Nomura.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Katie Nomura, Assistant Town Manager, here to provide the federal funding update for the town. Of the approximately $10 million in federal funding we've been awarded, approximately $3 million is still outstanding, not yet received. However, I will note that most of what has not been received is due to projects still in progress. So as we've continued to monitor this over the last several months, we aren't seeing issues with being reimbursed for things we should be properly reimbursed for, as we were concerned about earlier. Given that this concern has not come to fruition yet, we were checking in to see if the council would be interested in sunsetting the requirement to come back every 2 months, and the staff would still commit to provide you updates as they arise, and of course bring anything of interest to your attention. And we could always agendize something at a future meeting if it becomes necessary. But we just wanted to provide that information, and I'm here for any questions.
Okay, let me take public comment on this first. Is there anyone online?
There are no hands raised online.
Okay, so I'll close public comment. Questions from council members? Comments? Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. I appreciate the work staff has done to keep us updated over the past several months. And, seeing where we haven't been reimbursed and understanding that it's for work that hasn't been completed and there's not work we've done where federal funds are being held up, I do think that recommendation makes a lot of sense. In fact, I know we'll have more discussion, but I'll make the motion that we sunset this requirement for bi-monthly updates and until or unless a funding holdup occurs that is impacted, that goes back to our original concern about federal funding being held back. If an event like that happens or something gets tied up, I would appreciate notification of the council. But I'm not seeing a reason for staff every 2 months to recreate these tables.
Okay, thank you. So we have a second further discussion. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of comments. So first, I was really glad to see that the IMLS funding was restored. I think that's really good news for us. So I think that's great. I know we are not sure if that'll end up back, supporting our programs in particular or not, but that's good to see. So I'm fine sunsetting the every 2 months report. I find this to be a valuable opportunity and exercise, and so I would request a friendly amendment to have a check-in update sometime early next year on this topic, just so we have a timestamp for us to have a discussion about this as we're going into budget, because I do think that there are lots of potential impacts that we don't necessarily foresee right now. I think one of the big ones that I'm thinking, two things that I'm thinking about are, one, the president has threatened to pull us out of FIFA, pull the Bay Area out of FIFA, and then FIFA has in turn threatened to go to Canada and Mexico instead of the United States, which would have an economic and logistical impact for the town. And so I'm fine with the motion, but I would request a friendly amendment to have a check-in in January or February of 2026.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? When you say check-in, would you mean the same agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Badami?
I just have a question for staff. probably next year we'll probably have a new mayor, and a new mayor could decide to put this on the agenda at any time if they want an update.
Based on the town's historic nature of changing the mayor every year, that's probably a high probability.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rennie?
I'm not seeing the need for the adjustment to the motion because the way Councilmember Risto described it is we were going to sunset the requirement, but staff would come back to us if something changed. So I don't know why we need a report to find out nothing's changed if you're going to let us know when something changes.
Yeah, our goal is regardless of whether the council asked or not, if there's a significant impact that comes down the pike, when we're prepared and have the right information for the council, we either provide it through the weekly memo or we'll email it out depending on the timing of it, or we'll bring it to council to get direction from council. And there's one potential impact that may be coming up in the next couple of months. However, so we still would do that. But if there's a comfort level and there's a desire to tie impacts that may be impacting some of our nonprofits and things of that nature, it may make better sense to, if you do want to do an update, align it with when we consider funding for nonprofits during the course of the budget process, because most of the impacts that I anticipate we will see are not necessarily going to be now withholding our federal funding for transportation or cutting, programming that has a significant operational impact to the base operations of the town. It's going to be probably impacting services that we support. And the conversation of how do you, if you want to respond to that, would tend to happen around that time frame of the budget.
Councilmember Risto.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm comfortable with the motion as it stands. I do think that I would like to believe that as we prepare for the next budget cycle or we start talking about grants, that relevant information to help us make that decision would be coming from staff regardless, because we would need to understand the landscape that our nonprofits are dealing with and how that might impact what we do with sustaining grants, et cetera. And so I would be more comfortable with leaving the update or a timestamp for at the time that we'll need it when we're making decisions, and then understanding that if something significant happens, which potentially there's something you alluded to that now I'm wondering, we'll hear about them when they happen. But I think having a routine check-in saying nothing changed is not helpful to me.
That's correct, Councilmember. One of the concerns that was raised when we discussed this type of reporting was we don't have capacity to monitor all the actions the federal government is taking and then consider how is it going to impact the town. We just don't have the bandwidth to do that. And so most of the time, the impacts that we're reporting on are coming to our attention from the federal government or directly from a source. And so if Caltrans is supposed to give us money that's coming from the federal government and something happens to them, they're then advising us. And so that's the information we're then putting into a report to give it to you. And so in our minds, when we hear a timely report back to you makes sense. If $1 million is being withheld for wildfire mitigation, clearly that's something that would go out to the council, not let's wait for March or let's wait for a future council meeting to be right away. I think what we really need to be clear is we're just not going out and trying to seek out impacts. Another impact that potentially is going to happen to us is what happens in November with a ballot measure that impacts the county. And what level of service does that translate into an impact to the town? And so we don't know. And I wouldn't want to report something to the council if we didn't have something to be able to say, here it is, just to let you know. And then you can decide, do you agendize a conversation? And in that conversation, do you agendize some kind of action if that's what you desire?
Okay, thank you. And through the mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, does that address your concern? I mean, I understand your concern. I just don't want to put specific time goal requirements on things right now.
Yeah. I think that's totally fine. I think what you just stated about, something like the outcome of the ballot measure is a good example of the kind of thing that I would, think depending on how that goes, we might need an update on that. And I think then sometime, one of the things that I was thinking about today with this, coming up is that this afternoon, just a few hours ago, the federal administration announced it would be sending the National Guard to San Francisco, like it's done in Chicago and Los Angeles, which will inevitably impact people in our community. And so I think as long as the understanding is, the town council wants to be apprised of things that the government, whether it's the federal government or the state government or the county government is doing that impact the town, that we want to be having those conversations. I think that's fine. I do think that this item is, as defined, pretty narrow. So the every 2 months list of grants we're hopefully going to get isn't necessary. But I would just sort of reemphasize that it's important for the town to be considering the context that we exist in, that we are not an island, and that these things going on outside of us impact us.
Yeah, before, so it sounds like we're about ready to vote on this, but I did want to point out to some things that are really, really local and really important. And that's the remaining $217,000 for the Highway 9 connector project. It sounds like, or it looks like from the report that we've expended it, but we haven't received that yet. And so if that one looks like there's an issue, I'm interested in getting an update on that one. And then the other one, again, really focusing on a local issue, is our roadside vegetation management and our wildfire preparation. And it looks like we front-loaded the work by spending town funds, and we haven't yet expended the funds that we expect to get back on the grant, and that's $1.4 million and $750,000. And so if due to the shutdown, these things aren't being processed, or other retaliatory measures that are being taken against regions of the country that are not favorable to the executive, those are things I think we need to know about right away, because we don't have a choice. We have to move forward with those. Those are not optional items in my mind. So I just wanted to add some weight to the items that I consider hyper-local, important issues that we need to stay on top of.
If through the mayor.
Yeah.
Katie Nomura, Assistant Town Manager. Just to clarify, for the $217,000 that you mentioned for the federal Highway 9, that I believe is just due to project closeout. These things do take processing time. There's no indication for us that we won't receive what is due to the town. For the other items, to your point about the federal shutdown, there aren't, how do I say this? There is delay in terms of they need to process things. Certain workers are not working, things of that nature, but it's not to a level where we believe it's going to impact the ultimate of us being reimbursed. If it does come to a point where we are concerned, we will definitely let you know.
Okay, great. So I'm comfortable in supporting the motion. Councilmember Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor. You made me remember something. Going to the two you just discussed. So the 1.4 grant, it looks like, and I think I remember correctly, we were moving forward, expending our funds on the grant above it, and we weren't starting the other one because we weren't sure if we were going to get paid for the grant above, kind of thing. So it was a let's go ahead with one, see if we get paid. If so, then we would start into this other one, which is a lot more town funds. Are we still thinking that way? Or are we feeling more comfortable now that maybe I don't think we've started the roadside vegetation management one. Are we now feeling more comfortable that we can go ahead and start that?
Thank you for the question. I believe we do feel more comfortable. We're obviously going to continue to monitor, make sure that we do everything properly. I also feel as though that may have been some of the strategic thinking behind it, but in reality, there's also limited bandwidth from staff to execute these projects. And so we chose one to prioritize, which was open space, which was worked on. And now we can consider the other vegetation management items. But I'll allow Director Burnham to add if there's any.
Let me just add to my question then. That would be if we're holding off on that, we're not going to run into a deadline expenditure of the funds where we lose money or we're racing to try to get it in.
Mike.
Nicole, do you mind coming up to the public podium? Or we'll give you a new mic.
Try this. There we go. Okay. Nicole Burnham, Director of Parks and Public Works. The Assistant Town Manager was correct in terms of us delaying work on the roadside while we worked through the open space. We actually, before year end, you will see a council request to award environmental services and project management for roadside. So we are moving that forward. We do stay in close contact. These are actually federal money managed through Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Services. And so we have Cal OES analysts that work with us. They have also, which is why, and the money actually comes to us through Cal OES. So Cal OES has the money from the federal government and distributes it to us. So we continue to work with them to seek our reimbursements as necessary, and they work with FEMA as needed. And that is how the open space project worked. That is how the roadside project will continue to work.
I just had a follow-up to that. So it looks like there's two items. The first one says Cal OES/FEMA, and then on the next page there's another, and that's for 1.467 million. And then on the next page, there's another one that says U.S. Forest Service, and that's 750,000. Is that more at risk?
Yes, I would say that is that grant. So those both of those grants from two different federal agencies have the same exact scope of services, which is part of why we've been picking our way through them. It's very, very challenging to work through that. It would have been easier if they didn't have the same scope. We have continued to work with USDA to preserve that money. That was through a congressional appropriation. And we've continued to try to preserve that money. That grant we did have a paperwork lapse early in this year. We've been in contact with USDA. The last time we contacted them was in September and didn't hear back from them. And now, of course, we're not hearing anything. So we're going to move forward now using the FEMA money that we know is available, and we'll have to circle back later for the USDA funding.
Great, thank you. I realize I should call the question. There's a motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the report, and we'd be looking forward to any updates on this topic in the future. So with that brings us to the bottom of our agenda. We have item number 9, which is the flood ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nicole Burnham, Director of Parks and Public Works. So tonight we're asking Town Council to consider a recommendation from the Planning Commission to update Town Code Chapter 29, Article 9, which is floodplain management. The town of Los Gatos has participated in the National Flood Insurance Program since January of 1979. The floodplain ordinance is what provides us the authority, us as staff, collectively in CDD and Public Works, the ability to manage development in the floodplain in accordance with the requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. The most recent updates to the ordinance were made in March of 2003. Since that time, there have been some pretty significant changes at the federal level to how floodplains are managed. And the Department of Water Resources at the state level encouraged the town to update the ordinance. so that we meet current standards. So this proposal is a wholesale replacement of our current ordinance section. We use template language provided by the Department of Water Resources that was reviewed by attorneys, as well as also reviewed by Valley Water at a local level. Specifically, there's a lot of changes, but specifically all the definitions are updated, as are the specific requirements for permitting structures within the MAP floodplain. This update also acknowledges the role the California Building Code plays in floodplain management. So historically, those two issues have kind of been bifurcated, and Public Works would see, the development applications, but there was no relationship to building code necessarily. So the new, kind of more modern floodplain management approach is to marry those two issues. So we also worked with CDD and with our chief building official in this update. Planning Commission considered the item on September 24th and found the proposed ordinance consistent with the town's general plan and voted in favor of forwarding the proposed ordinance to town council. And that's it from a technical perspective. I don't know if the town attorney has anything to add.
Okay, so I'll take public comment at this point. Is there anyone who'd like to comment on the flood ordinance?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, I have no cards, so I'll close public comment. Questions from the council? Don't see any questions. I don't have any. Councilmember Badami?
Try a motion. I move to accept the Planning Commission's recommendation and introduce an ordinance repealing Town Code Chapter 29, Article 9, Floodplain Management in its entirety, and replacing it with a new Chapter 29, Article 9, Floodplain Management, including the updated flood hazard maps.
Vice Mayor?
Second.
Further discussion? Don't see any. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Okay, so that brings us to council matters. Thank you, Ms. Burnham. And so why don't I start at the Councilmember Badami end of the table tonight.
I don't have a whole lot to report. On October 14th, I participated in school lunch week at Blossom Hill Elementary School. And on October 16th, I attended the Police Foundation's recognition luncheon at the JCC. And it was a wonderful event every year. I think it can't get any better, but it does. That's all I have.
Councilmember Risto.
Thank you. The week of October 10th, or the few days of October 10th or 8th to the 10th, I attended the League of Cities annual conference along with our town manager, the mayor, the vice mayor, and elected officials up and down the whole state of California. I'm sure our mayor will have more to say about it, but there were a variety of really good sessions, including some on disaster communications, parking solutions. There were actually quite a few sessions on disaster because there were quite a few council people there from communities that had suffered from wildfire, including the LA area. Construction of ADUs, difficult council meetings, etc. This is always a great opportunity to connect with other electeds. We had dinners with West Valley council members, but I had great conversations in addition with people from Central Valley and Mammoth and other communities where you have a conversation and you realize you're dealing with similar issues, and sharing experiences is really valuable. I also was privileged to speak on a panel with another council member and two city managers on good governance, and we'll be continuing that conversation, but it was about how to have an effective relationship, working relationship with a council manager form of government, and supporting staff and working with the community. When the panel was over, I probably could have talked to people for another 2 hours. There's a lot of discussion about good management. On Saturday the 11th, in addition to the vice mayor, who can report more on it, I attended the Youth Citizen of the Year Awards. This is an annual event where high school students in our community are awarded, they're commended by all of our local service clubs, the town, the county, and even our state representatives. And in fact, Isabella, who was here earlier tonight doing the pledge, was one of the recipients of the Youth Citizen of the Year Award. The next day, I was at Yavna Day School. There was the 2025 Climate Fair, which was an interfaith event. Mr. Virgo was there. I saw a number of people from a variety of faiths there to talk about climate justice and what can be done to mitigate the impacts of climate change. And Assemblymember Ash Kalra was there to talk about the work he's doing personally and in his work as an elected. On the 16th, I also attended the Los Gatos Monte Sereno Police Department Recognition Awards Luncheon. Always a great opportunity to hear the heroic and hard work that our officers are doing and to see that level of recognition. And then on last Friday, for National School Lunch Week, I was at Dave's Avenue with Officer Justine, and we were helping serve lunch to the students at Dave's Avenue. There were two interesting things that occurred besides the really great interactions with the kids, because there's so much positive energy there. One is there was a surprise fire alarm. They had just had a drill the week before. It wasn't a drill. Apparently a microwave created some smoke that set off the alarm, but it was amazing to be standing there and all of a sudden this alarm goes off and kids just flooded out, lined up perfectly, didn't talk, followed direction. I don't know if they're always that perfect at it or if the fact that they had a drill the week before and then a few minutes later, like maybe 10 minutes later, the fire department came, said everything was safe, and we had an extended lunchtime. The other fun part of that is there is, I guess, every few months, an opportunity for the students to try a new food. And so the novel item was finger limes, which I'd never heard of, but they're actually limes that look like fingers. They almost have like an avocado skin. They're long and skinny. They look kind of weird. I was so impressed with how many students came up to the stand to snap one in half and taste something that they'd never tasted in their lives, just squirted it into their mouths, super tart. And what they got to do then was rate the food as either loved it, liked it, or tried it. And then they got a prize for doing that. And there were a number of kids who came back and wanted more. So I just thought that was great, continuing to challenge kids to try new things, and they were quite eager to do that. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. So I also attended the League of Cities conference, found it really productive, got to engage with some really thoughtful leaders on issues like housing. I got to attend a sort of youth advocacy panel, which was right up my alley. So yeah, learned a ton and connected with some great folks up there. Also attended Youth Park Day and the Youth Citizens of the Year award ceremony. Couldn't be more impressed by our young people. They have done more at the age of 17 than I have, being 10 years older than them, so very impressive. Also attended the Police Foundation Awards Luncheon, really enjoyed that. Great to see some of our newer officers and officers that had received recent promotions. I did my National School Lunch Week participation at Van Meter, and they had just thumbs up, thumbs down. So and there were a few more thumbs down. We had jicama with a little bit of something on it, and I got swarmed by kids who desperately wanted erasers. Erasers were a big hit. Bookmarks, not so much. So that was fun. I attended the BAMEC Project Progress Never Stops brunch, and BAMEC is an LGBTQ advocacy organization, and I highlight this because they highlighted how important it is to continue supporting our LGBTQ community as attacks on members of that community have risen in frequency and severity in the past year or so. Then I also had a very productive meeting about e-bikes with the Los Gatos High School principal and one of the board of trustees. The update on that is that they are in the process of rolling out an e-bike, actually a bike, which includes e-bike registration program. So they are full steam ahead on one of the four main recommendations, that the one that was arguably the most difficult to do, and so that's fantastic. They estimate that they have maybe 10 kids or less riding illegal e-motorcycles to school, which is really good. So they're working on cracking down on that and encouraging safe and sane legal e-bike behavior. So that's, I think, really good and I think going to make a big difference. So I'm excited to learn more about that. And finally, I attended a meeting of the Finance Commission.
Councilmember Rennie.
I have nothing to report.
Okay, so I'm going to go briefly because many of the meetings were covered. I would remark that the League of California Cities, I attended, I think, 5 sessions that touched on wildfire or emergency preparedness. And my reflection is that we're doing a lot here, and we're probably ahead of a lot of communities in the way we're thinking and doing. But I got a nugget of information from every one of those, and I need to turn them over to our emergency manager because there are always great ideas. And so, but I think for all the reasons that others have said, it's a great conference. I participated in the Finance Commission meeting on the 13th. And then on the 15th, I attended a very important and momentous activity, and that was the hearing in Superior Court on the town versus Aria Lux. And the hearing went for, I believe, about 2 hours. And it was on a motion that the town filed, and there were arguments presented on both sides. I would just remark that the respondent's attorney, which is essentially the attorney for the other side, commented on some of the things that council members said at the study session in their opening remarks about builder's remedy being a disaster and about other reasons for which developments could get denied. And so they're all listening, but also I think, we need to continue to do what we have to do to represent our residents. And I think that was a very, very important hearing. I think we're probably going to hear in about a month the judge's decision, and then there'll be decisions about how to proceed after that. I, of course, attended the recognition luncheon. The awards were terrific, very inspiring. We have to figure out how to encapsulate that and provide those stories back for the rest of our community, because not everybody can attend that lunch. And it's, I think it's important. I toured a facility called Unlock, which is a pre-opening tour, and mayors of most of the West Valley cities were invited. It's a facility, a health facility for older adults, and it will serve 400 older adults, and they will be providing transportation. And I think it's a convenient location for folks in Los Gatos. It's in South San Jose, kind of near the old Kaiser Hospital area, and it's just a short run down 85, and they have literally over 100 vehicles that they use to provide people to get to those services. So it was really eye-opening. It was pre-opening, and I think it'll be very important for our community. I observed the DEI Commission meeting, and I want to just report a couple of things about that. There were only 5 adult voting members who were present. There was 1 voting member who was remote. That's out of the 9 that we've authorized. And they had no action items on their agenda. Everything was discussion only. And so I would suggest, if it's possible for other council members to attend. I was, again, the only council member. There was only 1 member of the public in the audience as well. So I think it's kind of eye-opening, the work that the DEI Commission is trying to do, but also I think hasn't really addressed some of the work plan issues for a couple of meetings now. Let's see. Again, National School Week, I followed up at Van Meter. I'd never been in Van Meter before, and we served something that was kind of tricky. It was an overnight oats cup, banana flavored and apple flavored, and I think the apple won, but the kids were trying anything. They were just terrifically energetic, and it was great to participate with them. So yesterday I attended a ribbon cutting at a company that's recently located in Los Gatos called Arms Cyber Defense, and it is a software company that provides cybersecurity, and they have quite a few employees, and they are growing rapidly, and it's terrific to see an innovation-based company select Los Gatos. It was a decision that they made to locate here, and it was one of the best attended ribbon cuttings that I had participated in. So that concludes my report, and so Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the past, I've provided updates to the council regarding a quarantine zone that was established regarding the Mediterranean fruit fly. And at the time, it wasn't necessarily covering Los Gatos. We recently received notification that parts of Los Gatos are now within the quarantine zone. And so I'll provide another update to the council. But for the public that is listening, it's 196 square miles that's covered by this fruit fly that damages fruits and whatnot. So the restrictions that residents are being asked are for anybody living in the quarantine zone, and I would just presume anybody in Los Gatos, that you don't remove any fruits or vegetables from your home garden outside your property and to consume them there. And when you're tossing anything away, to seal it very well in a bag and dump it in the garbage, not the green waste, to reduce the spread of the fruit fly. Secondly, we've been, as part of our 2025-26 budget process, evaluating our insurance, joint powers authority, the coverages and the costs associated with that, to see if there was a better cost and coverage profile that would help us with the projected deficit going forward. We've evaluated several joint powers authorities, and we're narrowing in on one that we'll be recommending to council later this year in, I think, the second meeting in November. With the hopes of expanding the coverages that we have, but also reducing the price that we pay annually for insurance. In terms of the League of Cities, I know 3 council members attended and talked about that. I wanted first to highlight the city attorney legal sessions, and God bless the city attorneys. It's a very dense, full force series of programs across the entire 3 days that we're there. However, specifically, there was one session on new affordable housing laws, and the expert that they picked to educate the entire state on those laws was Goldfarb and Lippman, which is a law firm that we've been using. So I kudos to them and to our residents to know that we do have experts advising the town on issues impacting us on one of our top 3 strategic priorities. And then lastly, kudos to Councilmember Ristow on her panel discussion of council manager relations. It was one of the last sessions, which typically people take off, but it was packed. And I heard very positive compliments after from attendees, and that the session could have gone for another hour with the number of people that were asking questions and trying to get advice from the panelists. And I just have to say, aside from kudos to the council member, I am very thankful for the productive relationship that we have in Los Gatos, because based on some of the communities and the problems that they raised, it could get a whole heck of a lot worse. So I am very appreciative of not just our leadership as council and managers, but our community, that will tackle difficult problems professionally and with integrity, and we'll get through. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Mayor?
Yeah.
If it's okay with you, I kind of didn't report anything, but I just thought of...
Go ahead.
If it's all right with you. I'm on the Fire Safe Council, and I don't consider it a council-related item, but today's presentation, I think, is important for me to give a little bit of information. There was a presentation by an expert from Berkeley. They had gone out and done most of the big fires that occurred in California and created a model from which houses burned and which houses didn't burn. And then from that model, they could then figure out, only about 20% of houses survive these major fires. If the house had hardening, which I think is really like siding and vents and stuff like that, you only got 25%. But instead of hardening, if you worked in the 0 zone, which is up to 5 feet, it went to 37% from 20. Then if you added hardening to that, it got to 40%. Then if you added the zone 1 to that, you then got down to about 45% survival rate of homes. So I thought that was very interesting data to share with you guys.
Well, thank you. Town Attorney.
Last week, the Town Council met in closed session to discuss 3 topics. There was one topic of anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, and 2 items of real property negotiation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, and there's no reportable action on those items.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if you could just add a little bit about the hearing and the timing when we may hear something back and what that decision might entail.
Yes. So both parties and the court requested a transcript of the hearing, which will take about 2 weeks to generate because it was a 2-hour hearing. And then the court will spend some time with the transcript. And my takeaway was that the judge will be likely to issue a decision within about 2 weeks from the time that she gets the transcript. So I think your estimate of 1 month was accurate.
And what would that decision be about?
Oh, it'll be a decision on the town's motion for summary judgment, meaning that the town asked the court to decide the issue of whether it's repetitive 90 days or a single 90-day period to render a planning application complete. And the town was asking for a decision based on the briefs that were filed. And if that motion were to be denied, then there would be a trial on the issue.
Okay, so thered be another decision point for the council at that point.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we're done. So with that, I adjourn this meeting.